Good morning. This is Pastor Josh, and this is the view from my chair. It's been a quiet morning so far, but I have seen some blue jays. One just flew by. I don't know if I'll be able to catch them on video today, but a beautiful morning today. But the more important view is our view into God's Word. Today we begin a series looking at the book of Hosea. It's been a fascinating study so far for me, and I hope that you will find it to be that way as well. Let me introduce us to the passage in particular here in Hosea chapter 1 through three different views. The first I'll just call the 30,000 foot view. Now, this kind of gives us a layout of this particular chapter or section in Hosea. It starts in verses 1 and 2 with the commission of Hosea. It's a strange one to be sure. God tells him to go and marry a woman of promiscuity. What follows is Hosea's marriage serves as a kind of parable of judgment on the people of Israel. And so the second section here, verses 3 through 9, serve to communicate a series of judgments, each corresponding to one of Hosea and his wife Gomer's children. But the last section, verse 10 all the way down to chapter 2, verse 1, is an expression of God's compassion. And so his judgment, or condemnation, is juxtaposed right against his compassion. And the tension that is created in all of this is, how is that possible? How can such strong judgment of God or condemnation of God exist right alongside of God's compassion? That tension drives the entire book. But let's dive in a little further and maybe take a look at the 3,000 foot level and look more carefully at the condemnation that is expressed through each of these children of Hosea and Gomer. It's an interesting tactic where the name of the child serves as an introduction to a particular declaration of judgment. So first we have the name Jezreel. That means God sows or God plants. And the name Jezreel is a setup for a description of a particular condemnation against the house of Jehu, the house of Jehu. If you're not terribly familiar with your Old Testament kings, then it can be helpful to look at a chart of the Old Testament kings. This one has, starting with the United Kingdom, with Saul and then David, and then down to Solomon, and then the divided kingdom. It could be really helpful to see, to put Hosea in context. So here's Hosea right here. He serves as the beginning of Hosea indicates through the course of several of the Judaic kings right over here, but only one Israelite king is introduced. It's Jeroboam II. Now we know that Hosea would serve through the reigns of several others, but he only mentions Jeroboam. Jeroboam is the third son of Jehu, and he would be followed by Zechariah. Zechariah's reign would end in an assassination, and it would be a fulfillment of a prophecy of judgment against his father Jehu. And so what Isaiah is communicating is that the prophecy against the house of Jehu is about to come to fulfillment, and it indeed would. But this first statement here, this first word against the house of Jehu, is then followed by an announcement of judgment against the entire house of Israel. The whole nation is under God's judgment. And so Jezreel sets up this pattern of the name of the child and then two specific announcements, in this case, two announcements of condemnation. one against Jehu, one against Israel. But this condemnation is paired with an expression of compassion that is tied to the name Jezreel. All the way down in chapter 1, verse 11, we see two expressions of Jezreel restored. First, the people will go up from the land. That word go up is an agricultural word, and it can also mean to flourish or grow. The people will grow in the land. They will extend, they will flourish so much they will extend out from it, and then they will be great. The condemnation of God is paired with the compassion of God. That same pattern shows up in the next child that is introduced. This one is Lo Ruhama. It means no mercy or no compassion. The first judgment is that God will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, but he will have compassion on the house of Judah. What's being expressed here is a division between Israel and Judah. It's already occurred, but God expresses that division here as a way of expressing judgment on Israel. That shows up in the compassion. It is restored in two different places. First, in chapter 1, verse 11, the Judeans and Israelites are together. It is the restoration of that. And then the people who were called no compassion or no mercy are now called compassion. And so that statement of condemnation is reversed. And then lastly, let me pick a different color here. Lastly, we have the child Lo Ami. This is in verse 8 of chapter 1. Lo Ami just means no, not my people. Not my people. The condemnation is that the people of God will be no longer the people of God, but even worse, God himself will no longer be their God. In Hebrew, this looks like lo, and then basically the same characters that would make up the word Yahweh. Sorry for the W there, should be a M instead of a W. What's being expressed here is God is saying, I will not be the I am for you. A powerful and a horrible judgment as far as the people of Israel are concerned. They will no longer be a people, and they will no longer have a God. This is perhaps the most devastating condemnation that's expressed. However, the condemnation is reversed in chapter 1, verse 10, where those who were called not my people are now called sons of the living God. It's a reversal of Lo Ami. And right down here, those who were called not my people will now be called my people. And so as we dive into the 3,000-foot view, we see that the condemnation is paired with a specific expression of compassion. And this raises a great deal of tension that frankly is not really answered in the book of Hosea. But if we zoom out to maybe what we can call a 3,000-foot view of the book of Hosea, first we put Hosea in the context of the minor prophets. Hosea is the first of what is called the Book of the 12, and the tension that is set up in the minor prophets is that the children of God have been separated from him. That's what's introduced there in Hosea chapter 1, verses 2 through 9. At the end of the Book of the 12, in Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, the Book of the 12, or the minor prophets, end with the statement of anticipation of the coming of the prophet Elijah, and then the specific coming is hoped for because when the prophet Elijah comes, he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. the separation between father and children expressed at the beginning of Hosea, and the hope for restoration expressed in Malachi communicates the tension of this entire segment of the Bible, known as the Minor Prophets in our Bible, or the Book of the 12 in the Hebrew Bible. And all of that ultimately is fulfilled in the New Testament. In the coming of Jesus, we see how the judgment or condemnation of God and the mercy or the compassion of God converge. How can God be both judgment and mercy? Well, we see their convergence in the person and work of Jesus, specifically on the cross. And then how are the people restored? The children who've been estranged from their father, how are they brought back in? Well, the fulfillment comes in the church. And in particular, we see this expressed in Romans chapter 9, verses 25 and 26, where the Apostle Paul uses Hosea chapter 1 to argue that the Gentiles are included with the disobedient children of Israel, both of whom are called sons of the living God by God's grace, God's gracious choosing or election of them, not by any works of their own, not by any merit of their own, but simply by God's grace and through the person and work of Jesus. And so the satellite view of Hosea helps us to see the fulfillment of the tension that's created right there in the very first chapter of Hosea. But far more importantly, it helps us to see the heart of a God who is wooing his wayward children, humanity, back to himself and providing for the means of his compassion through his own Son, Jesus Christ. So as you study Hosea, as you teach it and share it with others, may you encounter the heart of a God who loves you in extreme and gracious ways. May you know his compassion firsthand. May God bless you.